26. When Eva stepped out from the bathroom and walked into the adjoining bedroom, she stopped, stunned. The bedroom, dimly lit by several large candles atop dressers, nightstands, and windowsills, was ghastly quiet. It was cold. The warm vapors all around her in the bathroom had been left behind. In a large cushioned chair near a window, a Japanese man was sitting cross-legged. He was middle-aged and dressed in a short-sleeved robe. She caught sight of his eyes twinkling behind gold-rimmed glasses which reflected the flickering candlelight. He had a neatly groomed square of a mustache which moved slightly as his upper lip twitched. The man must have been sitting there the whole time while she was bathing. Eva trembled with shame. The Japanese soldier had told her to leave the bathroom door open, but why didn't she shut it after he had left? The man's eyes were on her, feasting. In the dim light, his eyes moved about hurriedly, watching her face, her throat, the shape of her body, all the way to her feet clad in delicate sandals with thick red straps. She could feel his eyes on her. Without a word, the man rose silently, taking slow, measured steps toward her. His hands slowly clenched and unclenched. Eva closed her eyes and stared at the floor. "Oh, Father, don't let that man touch me." The man came right up to her. With his short, thick fingers, he touched her chin gently and raised her head up. She saw him, but could not look at him. "No afraid,姑娘," he offered awkwardly in Chinese. "I no heard you, 姑娘." He was about half a head taller than she. She could smell the liquor on his breath. His hand moved from her chin to her shoulder and slowly down her arm. His hands fumbled at the sash around her waist. He straightened the knot, his hands lingering at her waist and then at her hips. He started to walk behind her. He laid his hands on her small, round shoulders and guided her slowly toward the bed. She closed her eyes. Her shoulders heaved and tears flowed from her eyes. She opened her eyes again. With hands still on her shoulders, the man had led her to the full mirror which stood on the floor next to the bed. He pressed his head against the back of her head, his face and chin rubbing against her hair and neck greedily. His calloused hands clawed at her skull, grasping handfuls of black hair. She could see his face in the mirror, and with his hands he held her head, forcing her to fix her gaze on the abhorrent ravishment. The man's fingers went to untie the white sash on the outer robe. Terrified, she raised her hands to stop him, but he pushed them down as she sobbed. She coughed and shivered uncontrollably. He pulled the sash away and let it fall to the floor. Slowly his hands grasped the folds of the robe and pulled them apart. His eyes widened at the sight of her young, pale body. He moaned, and his hot breath was foul against her neck. He groped her now, touching her body underneath her robes. He pushed against her from behind and grasped her tightly with trembling fingers. "Oh, Father, come and save me." He jerked the robes off her shoulders, and they fell silently to the floor about her feet. She was completely naked now. She shivered. Her body was covered in goose flesh. With terrifying strength he lifted her at the waist, carried her a few clumsy steps, and threw her onto the bed. Before she even had a chance to move, he fell on her. She tried to fight, but she had no strength, delirious now that she was being crushed. He held her down and forced himself machine-like upon her with a raging fury. When she felt the pain, it was as if she was being split in two, but only an empty blackness now swirled in her mind. Her body was somewhere else. It wasn't hers anymore. In her mind, she searched for a ray of light in the all-enveloping darkness. Save me, father. But when the horror had passed, she knew she was still alive. He had collapsed unexpectedly on top of her, moaning pitifully. A moment later, he rolled away, drunk in his blind, lustful stupor. Eva looked down at her naked body. It was red with bruises. Her thighs quivered uncontrollably, and when she tried to move, the pain stung her again. The savage, monstrous thing was now heaving next to her. She was cold now, and despite the pain, she struggled to raise herself up. She looked around the room. It was the same as before. The candles burned faintly as the shadows flickered. As she sat up, her head whirled. She closed her eyes again, then slid one leg slowly off the bed and onto the cold wooden floor. She struggled to stand, and the floorboards creaked underneath her as she took a few painful steps towards the crumpled robe as it lay on the floor in front of the mirror. As she crouched down to pick it up, she saw her reflection, her disheveled hair, and the redness in her eyes and on her face. She turned away at once, clutched the robe with both hands, and held it tightly against her as she started to sob once more. Then she heard a hideous cry coming from the bed. She saw the savage, monstrous thing come to life. It sprang from the bed naked, eyes staring blankly ahead as if it had glimpsed something horrific. It looked into the dim light of the room as if confused, disoriented, then ran about feverishly as if searching for something. It had seen her crouched on the floor beside the mirror, and it now flew into an uncontrollable rage. There was bright glint and a swishing, whispering sound in the air as it raised something high over its head. It shrieked at her. "You're toad, you filthy hag!" She closed her eyes for the last time. "Oh, Father, I come to you with this solid body. Will you forgive my sins? Can I be one of your children, sit by your feet, and bask in your kindness and love?" A voice spoke, rushing toward her like a silent whisper. "Yes." Eva's lips froze in a wan smile as she hit the floor.